A lot of the technology that's affecting senior care right now is kind of more social oriented. We've been hearing things about robotics with the elderly, but there's something that's coming down the pike that from my perspective looks like it could be revolutionary in terms of the entire entire healthcare system, especially dealing with the elderly. I'm here with Rahul Mahadevan. He's with, are you a co-founder of Life2 or the founder? Okay. Now, you have built a suite of predictive models to help identify future medical problems or needs for the elderly. So models that will help predict that. How'd you create those models?
So we've been doing as a company predictive analytics for over 20 years. In other domains. We've done predictive modeling in insurance, in finance. Transportation was the last company we did it in. And the concept around predictive modeling is all the same. Can you take data and look for trends in causality and correlation to predict future adverse events? Right? And you can define adverse events in any way you want. In the transportation industry where we were last, we were able to predict which drivers in a fleet company were likely to have an accident in the next 30 to 60 days. So that companies could put plans in place to mitigate the risk of those accidents from happening. If you take that same concept and apply it to healthcare, and you ask yourself, how can we use data that exists and try and identify the likelihood of someone having an adverse event, be that the risk of contracting a preventable infection in the next 24 to 48 hours, or whether they're likely to be responsive to a treatment to treat diabetes or hypertension. Or are they likely to move out of a senior living facility, and what can you do to keep them in? The concept on analytics is the same. It's trying to identify what the right predictive variable is, and can you use data in a way that allows you to accurately predict something in the future.
And for the senior care community, do you have that predictive data?
So the data exists. I mean, the challenge in the senior care community is, I think the industry is a little behind in terms of data collection. So from our perspective, it's been challenging to find organizations that are sitting on a wealth of data. Rather than approaching individual senior care facilities, we've had to go and approach business partners like a Brookdale and like Formation Capital and Linkage and so on and so forth, who are sitting on a large amount of data. And being able to predict adverse events is not just a combination of clinical information. It's also being able to scrape information that exists on the web. So when you try and predict someone, the likelihood of somebody contracting pneumonia or upper respiratory infection, clinical information is important, but looking at pollen count in the air is maybe just as important as a potential indicator. So we look at not just clinical information, but we also look at structured data that exists in a data set, but are able to not also mine unstructured data. To look at using natural language processing to identify keywords and phrases within nursing notes or emails. And we've added on top of that the ability to look at sentiment analysis. So it's not just what words are used in free-form text, but the context within which they're used, and are those potential indicators of a potential adverse event.
A lot of people are worried about their parents' finances, people taking advantage of them. Financial fraud against the elderly is unfortunately, a very common thing nowadays. But there is a new product out there to help take care of that. I'm here with Stinchcombe. He's one of the founders of TrueLink. Is it TrueLink or TrueLink Card?
TrueLink.
TrueLink. And why don't you tell me a little bit about TrueLink and what it does and when you formed it?
So I came at this as somebody whose family needed the product. My grandma was suffering from kind of mild memory loss, but started donating to a lot of charities, subscribing to a lot of magazines, shopping off the TV, entering sweepstakes. There's a whole set of patterns. And the thing that we realized was that there wasn't any way for my mom, her daughter, to help her kind of manage her spending and maintain her independence. And so that's really kind of the genesis of TrueLink, is a set of tools for somebody caring for, concerned about an elderly person's finances, to help them kind of stay on track.
Mm-hmm. But why not just get a debit card and have someone just put $100, $200 in it every month, and so you can't You can't overspend.
Yeah, exactly. So typically, the problem might involve overspending, but it's not necessarily a spending volume thing so much as what you're spending the money on, right? So my grandma was living independently, cooking her own meals, shopping for food, cleaning her apartment, buying her clothes, and yet was also donating tons of money to these charities in the mail, for example. And so we couldn't really say, you only have $1,000 a month because she might give it away to charities in the first week and then not be able to cook her food for the rest of the month. And so the point is, you need kind of tight, fine-grained controls. Basically the story is that every senior's spending patterns and needs are different, but we've seen it all before.
And your mother was the one who was monitoring.
Exactly.
No pushback from your grandmother.
I think that there's a set of difficult conversations around aging. In some cases, it's pretty amiable. I think there were times when my grandma didn't want my mom breathing down her neck about, one particular charity or another. She would say, like she would hold up a fundraising letter, for example, and say, if I don't write this check, it says here that this kid is going to die if I don't donate 6 cups of rice. My mom would say, okay, so, I did a little bit of reading about this particular organization, and actually 97% of their budget goes to fundraising. She says, oh, okay, and she'll put down that letter and open the next one. And you say, you see there's this whole pattern, right? But if you have memory loss, you might, for example, renew your annual subscription every week.
All right. What happens, I assume when your grandmother is using this, she has to use a PIN number. When she's buying something?
No, you sign it just like any other Visa card.
Okay.
Sign the receipt.
So how about if she's doing it on the phone?
Same story. It works like any other Visa card. You can use it with a PIN to get money out of the ATM. You can go into a bank and give them the card and take out cash over the counter. Okay. You can get cash at a point of service if you remember your PIN. You can just swipe it like any other Visa card, put it into an online form, give it out over the phone.
Tell me about the blocking mechanism. How does that work?
So because it's a card that we've issued, when you swipe it, the transaction actually gets routed to our servers, and so we can compare it in real time to a database of known sketchy merchants, to individualized patterns and rules. So for example, for one person it might be no magazine subscriptions. For another person it might be, here's 5 magazines she likes. For another person, it might be magazines are fine; they're not a problem, right?
And that's all done electronically.
Yeah, we have about 1/5 of a second to do that. So
right, and so the family members basically fill out a form to let you know all that kind of stuff. Exactly. And that has any glitches with that?
There's always some complexity, right? So you might say, oh, I don't want any charities, right? And then you say, oh, actually, when I said no charities, I meant no charities except her church, right? And so you're going to end up going back and kind of fixing that over time. But, basically the idea is that you have all of the tools you need.